And welcome back to another daily devotion. I am Pastor Roy here at Woodlawn Christian Church in Lake City, Iowa, and this devotion is for Thursday, January 11th of 2024. We have made it to the 5th chapter of the Gospel of Mark, and today we are talking about the story of the Gerasene demoniac, the healing of the Gerasene demoniac. And actually, we're going to split this story into two installments. Tomorrow we will finish it, so Friday we'll finish this bit of chapter 5, and then Monday we'll pick up with the rest. But today we're going to look at verses 1 to 13 in chapter 5. This will get us started. Tomorrow we'll deal with 14 to 20, okay? So we have just gotten done crossing over the Sea of Galilee, and when Jesus has stilled the storm on the way across, remember, he'd been teaching in parables and then the storm, and now we're going to deal with this demoniac. So, chapter 5, verses 1 to 13. They came to the other side of the sea, to the country of Gerasenes. And when he had come out of the boat, there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit, who lived among the tombs, and no one could bind him any more, even with a chain. For he had often been bound with fetters and chains, but the chains he wrenched apart, and the fetters he broke in pieces, and no one had the strength to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and on the mountains, he was always crying out and bruising himself with stones. And when he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and worshipped him. And crying out with a loud voice, he said, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you, by God, do not torment me." For he had said to him, "Come out of the man with you unclean spirit." And Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" He replied, "My name is Legion, for we are many." And he begged him eagerly not to send him out of the country. Now a great herd of swine was feeding there on the hillside, and they begged him, "Send us to the swine, let us enter them." So he gave them leave, and the unclean spirits came out and entered the swine, and the herd, numbering about 2,000, rushed down the steep bank into the sea and were drowned in the sea. Okay, and one thing we might note there is that pigs can swim. So, whatever that means. We'll deal with the end of this first and then go back to the beginning. Sometimes I like to do that. Here at the end, the demons, legion, because there are many, they asked not to be banished from the country entirely, but to put them into the pigs. Now, you got to remember what pigs were. Now, this is Gentile territory. That's why there's pigs there at all, because in the Jewish territory, you wouldn't have had swine. They're unclean animals. You're not going to see them nowadays in the Christian areas you would, but in those days, this is Jewish, and so the only place you're going to see them is in Gentile areas, and now they're in Gentile country. But the swine are about as unclean as you can get. If you remember the story of the prodigal son, and he's feeding the pigs, and that's part of that story about how over the top it is and how far down the road, and the ladder, we should say, I guess, he has slid because he's gotten to the point where he's having to tend pigs, which are just nasty, unclean things in the Jewish faith. You can't get worse than a pig, for pity's sakes. And so the fact that he's having to feed them, that shows how diminished the son was. And here, this shows how vile these spirits are, these demons, that they would say, "Put us in the pigs." They willingly want to go into the swine. That just shows how repugnant these demonic forces are. And then we get an exclamation point, because the demonic forces are so repugnant, the unclean pigs can't tolerate being possessed by them, and they kill themselves, because pigs can swim, rather than be filled with these demonic spirits, rather than to be possessed, I should say, by these demonic spirits. They commit suicide, hara-kiri, if you will. So that just puts an exclamation point about how bad these guys were, how repugnant they were. The pigs, the most repugnant of all the pigs, they were repugnant to the pigs. Bad deal. So, back to the beginning. Jesus again crossed into this Gentile territory. There is this man that is living among the tombs. And of course, the dead are unclean in the Jewish world, so this guy is really bad. He's out there living among the dead. That's not that's just shows how awful he is. And what is in him is not how awful he is, but what is possessing him is. And it's that thing that's is possessing him is forcing him to hurt himself. He's beating on himself and bruising himself with stones. Nothing can control him because of this this thing that has taken possession of him. These things, I should say, that have taken possession of him. And the really interesting thing is when he sees Jesus, he runs to Jesus, and it says, and worshiped him. Now that word there in Greek literally means to prostrate yourself before someone and to kiss the ground. It is to be prostrate before them, you in an act of submission and we wouldn't want to say obedience per se, but the RSV translates it as worshipped. A lot of them it's they bowed down is the way a lot of translations translate it. Ran and bowed down before him. Worshipped is a little more, is a much stronger word. But it's to kiss the ground before him, basically, to recognize him as a superior, to be prostrate before a superior being or person, is what it's talking about there. The demon realizes who he is. The demons, rather, realize who he is, and they identify him. What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you by God, do not torment me. Please let me go. And then Jesus says for them to come out, and that's when they ask to go into the Spirit. What can we take away from the story for ourselves? Well, who's hurting the man in this story? Well, he's been possessed by a spirit, but more than likely, how did he become to be possessed by that spirit? Usually we have invited that kind of behavior into our lives. Most of what I see in life, my own life included, the bad that comes is stuff that's been wounds that have been self-inflicted, like this guy beating on himself with the rocks. These injuries typically are self-inflicted. Not always, but a great number of them are. And it's not always about the injury we had, but how did we react to that injury sometimes? How did we react to how someone did something or said something? Are we making it a mountain out of a molehill, as they always say? Many times in life we do that. I see this constantly. I see this a lot, not to get myself in trouble, but I see a lot of this in other generations, younger generations, where things just they cling on to things much harder than perhaps in the past. Not to say in my generation we didn't, and I know people that do, but it seems to be becoming more prolific, more common, more of a thing that happens. I'm seeing more and more of it, and we want to be careful of that because we are always our own worst enemies. Sometimes we have to just forgive and forget, and that's what Jesus calls us to do. He wants us to be reconciled. He wants us to be reconciled to ourselves as well. So we need to. The hardest person I always say to forgive is myself. It's sometimes easy to forgive someone else, depending on what it is, but it's always difficult to forgive ourselves, and we need to do that as well. We need to forgive. We need to move on. We need to stop beating ourselves with these rocks. We need to stop being bound in these fetters that we find ourselves in. Out here, the Gerasene demoniacs breaking them, so that's a little bit of a change the direction a little bit, but we are often bound by the things that we bind ourselves with. Let's not be doing that. Let's try to get rid of cast out those bad influences in our lives, those demonic influences, if you will. So that's where I'm going to leave you at today. We'll come back. We'll pick up at verse 14. We'll go through 20, finish this section about the Gerasene demoniac, see what more we can come up with to talk about it tomorrow. Have a blessed day, and please, please, please be a blessing to someone today. If you enjoy these devotions, these little studies, please like and subscribe. Come back and see us again. We'd love to see you again here. Feel free to share these videos. There's a lot of videos, by the way. I will put up another plug. If you want to watch something other than about Mark's Gospel, take a look at the playlist. We've covered the majority of the New Testament now, just a couple of books short of being done with the New Testament. Have a blessed day. Be a blessing to someone today. Remember, God loves you. Take care. Bye-bye. Come see us again.